Welcome to the deep dive. We're looking at some really potent material you share this time. It's excerpts from Esther Perel's The State of Affairs, Rethinking Infidelity.
Yes, it really is potent. It tackles a subject that, well, it touches so many people and often very deeply.
Absolutely. And what's great about Perel's approach, I think, is that she doesn't really give you simple answers, does she?
No, not at all. It's more of an invitation, really, to grapple with how complex infidelity is, to move past those, those knee-jerk reactions we hear all the time.
Exactly. Things like, oh, it's the ultimate betrayal, or trust is gone forever, standard stuff.
Right.
But Perel encourages us, and hopefully we can do this in our deep dive, to look, well, deeper, to explore the why behind it all and how it plays out in relationships today.
And she's very clear about acknowledging the intense pain it causes. I mean, she sees it constantly in her therapy practice. But she also asks, does just condemning it actually stop us from understanding something important?
Yeah, that's the core question. Why do people stray? That's what she asks. Why does discovering it hurt quite so much? Can we understand the reasons? And maybe, just maybe, learn something that could help our own relationships. So maybe the place to start is, well, what even is infidelity now? It sounds simple, but...
Oh, it's far from simple, especially, now with digital communication and everything.
Right.
Perel gives some really striking examples. Like there's a man who genuinely thinks he's faithful, but his partner feels completely betrayed by his intense online chats.
Okay.
Or think about Ashley, whose girlfriend in a lesbian relationship hooks up with a guy. That throws everything into question for her.
And then you get these really personal boundary lines.
Yeah.
Like Shannon finding condoms when they're actively trying for a baby. That's a clear violation for her.
Exactly. Or Jared using what Perel calls customized pornography on Skype. No physical contact, but his partner sees it as a deep betrayal.
So it really shows there's no single definition that fits everyone, does it?
Not at all. And that's probably why the stats on how common it is are, well, they're all over the place. Anywhere from, say, 26% to maybe 70% for women and maybe 33% to 75% for men. It's a huge range.
Right.
And the numbers seem to be going up, especially, interestingly, for women. That infidelity gap seems to be closing.
So how do we get a handle on it then? Perel uses this idea of a three-sided prism.
Yes, that's a really useful way to think about it. She talks about secrecy, sexual alchemy, and emotional involvement.
Okay.
But it's not like a strict checklist. It's more a framework to understand the different elements that often play a part in feeling like infidelity has occurred.
So it's not just about the physical act.
Precisely. That idea of an emotional affair is key here. We expect our partners to be our main emotional confidant, right?
Yeah, usually.
So sharing deep feelings, vulnerabilities with someone else, even without sex, that can feel like a huge betrayal of that expected closeness. It challenges that whole idea of the partner being your everything.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it feels like understanding what it means now in the 21st century requires looking back a bit too. Its meaning has changed quite a lot over time.
Oh, absolutely. Perel illustrates this so well using 3 generations. Maria, her daughter Sylvia, and then Sylvia's son, Zach.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, for Marie's generation, marriage was often, for life, based on different ideas about duty, society, procreation. Divorce was a huge taboo.
Right, very different expectations.
Then Sylvia's generation hits the workforce, gains more reproductive freedom, divorce becomes more acceptable, even remarriage. Individualism starts to rise. And Zach, he's navigating relationships in the digital age. Infidelity looks different again, online platforms, even within same-sex couples, finding new ways betrayal can happen.
So the context keeps shifting.
Massively. If you zoom out, you see how individualism, consumer culture, this kind of demand for personal happiness, it's totally reshaped marriage.
And so infidelity changes too because marriage itself has changed.
Exactly. The adulterous shadow, as Perel calls it, it reflects the thing it's shadowing.
And think about what we ask of marriage now. We want, like, total stability and constant excitement, familiarity and novelty.
It's a tall order. Trying to get all of that under one roof, that's challenging.
Yeah.
And Perel makes this interesting point about how, for many people now, romantic love has almost stepped into the space religion used to occupy.
How so?
It's become a main source of meaning, transcendence, finding your soulmate, which, can lead to these incredibly high, maybe even impossible expectations for one person to meet all those needs.
And she talks about different models of marriage, the cornerstone versus the capstone.
Yes, that's a really helpful distinction. The cornerstone model, more common in the past, saw marriage as the foundation you build your life on together. You expect difficulties, you grow together.
Okay.
The capstone model, more common today, is like you get yourself sorted first. Career, emotional maturity, then you get married as the final capstone on your well-built individual life.
Ah, I see. So if marriage is the capstone, something you put on top when everything else is supposedly perfect.
Then an affair feels like it shatters the whole structure, perhaps. It hits harder because the expectation was completion, perfection almost.
Whereas the cornerstone model might have had more built-in expectation of bumps in the road. Not condoning it, but maybe less shattering to the core identity of the marriage itself.
Perhaps it's a different framework. The capstone relies heavily on that idea of individual self-control and total transparency, maybe making it feel more vulnerable when that breaks down.
Okay, so when those lines are crossed, when infidelity is discovered, what's the emotional impact like? Perel uses some strong language.
Oh, it's often described as just a maelstrom, a profound shock. She points out that the reactions, the obsessive thoughts, constantly being on edge, not sleeping, they really mirror PTSD symptoms.
Like trauma.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
actually become a specialized area in mental health now, dealing specifically with the fallout from affairs. The story she tells about Gillian finding her husband cost his emails.
Yeah.
8 years of an affair discovered digitally. That really brings it home, doesn't it?
It does. The sheer volume of evidence the digital age can provide. Texts, photos, emails. It's a very modern form of discovery and potentially much more detailed and, well, brutal than finding a letter used to be.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how culture shapes the response. Perel contrasts the deep identity crisis often seen in the West with, say, some Senegalese women she spoke to.
How do they see it differently?
Well, within that cultural context, some might attribute a husband's infidelity more to men's nature. Now, that comes from a patriarchal setup, obviously, but paradoxically, it might offer some women a way to protect their own sense of self-worth from being completely destroyed by his actions.
That's fascinating. Because here, often, our identity gets so wrapped up in being chosen, being the one.
Right.
Our self-worth can feel, as Perel puts it, mortgaged to romantic love. So the betrayal isn't just about the partner's actions. It feels like an attack on who we are. It creates this deep existential confusion. Was it all a lie? Am I not who I thought I was?
Which brings us to, well, why? Why do people do it? It seems it's rarely straightforward.
Almost never just one simple reason, like boredom or lack of love. It's usually much more layered.
Like Costa, the man whose affair Gillian discovered, his whole identity was built on not being like his cheating father, wasn't it?
Exactly. And that very rigidity, that strong I am not that guy stance, ironically might have contributed. He felt his life was getting predictable, the affair offered excitement, a connection to a lost self. Perel also explores this fascinating idea that sometimes affairs happen after a major brush with mortality, a loss, a tragedy. The affair becomes kind of desperate grab for life, an affirmation against death.
Even symbolic losses, like losing a job or infertility. Yes, those too. Anything that confronts us with limits, endings, mortality. And then there's this concept of erotic silence, particularly in long-term relationships, often affecting women.
Okay, what's meant by erotic silence?
It's a term from therapist Dalma Han. Perel discusses how the constant demands of being a partner, a mother, the selflessness expected. It can conflict with what she calls the inherent selfishness of desire. It becomes hard to even access, let alone prioritize, one's own erotic needs.
Right, and that connects to that research by Mina and Sims, doesn't it? About the dragging forces on desire in long-term couples.
Absolutely. Things like routine, knowing each other too well, the way certain roles, parent, caregiver, can feel desexualizing, they all dampen that spark over time for many couples.
So, in a way, the affair can seem like a way to have both,
Yeah.
security and adventure.
Perel calls it a potential both-hand solution. You get the stability at home, and you outsource the passion, the risk. It creates this illusion, at least initially, that everything changes, yet nothing need change.
That's a powerful illusion. She also looks at some less common ideas, like men who use transactional sex, right? Exporting their lust.
Yes, and she pushes back on the idea that it's just about sex. She asks, could it sometimes be a way for men, within that specific framework, to access forbidden feelings like tenderness or vulnerability, things they might struggle with elsewhere? It touches on that idea of a loveless split.
Interesting. And one more motivation she mentions, the rebellion of the rejected.
When someone feels consistently unseen, unimportant, just insignificant in their main relationship. Seeking validation, feeling desired somewhere else, that can become incredibly compelling. It's an escape from what she calls marital gloom.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Definitions, history, impact, motivations. It's incredibly complex. What happens after the affair is discovered? The paths forward seem just as varied.
Absolutely. And one of the first most agonizing questions is disclosure. To tell or not to tell.
Right, that must be incredibly difficult.
Hugely. And culture plays a massive role. Peril contrasts Marnie, who impulsively revealed her mother's affair and kind of shattered the family, with Amira, from a more collectivist background, who chose silence to protect the family unit despite her own pain. It really shows how different the priorities can be. And, of course, the ethical tightrope therapists walk with secrets in couples counseling is immense.
Yeah, I can imagine. What about when the person who was cheated on then cheats? Like retaliatory cheating.
Peril discusses that too. Using examples like Jess and Leilani, it often looks like simple revenge, wanting to inflict the same pain.
Which is understandable, maybe.
It is understandable, but often it's more complex. It can be about reclaiming power, regaining a sense of control after feeling so powerless and betrayed.
Okay. Now, Peril also reframes jealousy in an interesting way, doesn't she? Not just as negative.
Right. She suggests it can also be an affirmation. It shows you value the partner, the relationship. She even uses terms like the shadow of love or erotic rage.
Erotic rage.
Yeah. And she notes that, perhaps counterintuitively, some couples actually find desire intensifies after an affair is revealed. There's an unexpected erotic charge.
Now, how does that even work? Betrayal leading to desire.
It's complicated. Peril links it partly to longing, wanting what you fear you've lost or might lose. The threat can, paradoxically, reignite things for some.
Okay. The urge for revenge must be strong, though. She talks about restorative versus retributive justice.
Yes, distinguishing between just wanting punishment, retributive, and wanting repair or healing, restorative. And she gives that amazing example of Camille's very creative, culturally specific approach to getting a kind of restorative justice from her husband.
So it's not always just about payback.
No. And while affairs can often signal underlying problems, Peril is careful to say they aren't always just a symptom. Sometimes they seem to come out of nowhere, maybe linked to that antidote to death idea or the both hand thing we talked about.
What about alternatives like consensual non-monogamy? Does she touch on that?
She does. She acknowledges the growing interest in it, stresses the absolute necessity of honesty and trust, but also realistically points out it has its own complexities and, well, potential for human mischief, as she puts it.
Not necessarily a simpler path.
Definitely not simple. So, looking at the long haul, affairs can destroy relationships, obviously, but sometimes couples endure. Sometimes it forces change. Sometimes it ends one chapter and starts another.
The bottom line is it always changes the relationship somehow.
Always. Every affair redefines the relationship. She talks about the deal breaker scenario, the immense challenge of rebuilding trust, but also the possibility of finding connection with others who've been through it.
And even after divorce, she mentions rituals to honor the past.
Yes, the importance of acknowledging what was shared even if the partnership ends. And finally, she categorizes couples who stay together afterwards into builders who prioritize commitment, the family structure, and explorers who actually use the crisis as a catalyst for much deeper self-examination and reconnection, transforming the relationship.
Builders and explorers. That's a useful way to think about it.
So wrapping this up, it's so clear from Perel's work that infidelity isn't one thing. It's incredibly layered, deeply human, and there are no easy answers, no universal truths that apply to everyone.
Yeah, the stories she shares really drive that home. And understanding it, as she says, isn't about excusing it.
Not at all. But it can offer really valuable insights, can't it? Into desire, commitment, how we navigate intimacy, how relationships are changing.
Absolutely. It definitely makes you reflect on your own assumptions, your own beliefs about it all.
And maybe it leaves us with a question to ponder. Given how relationships are evolving and the challenges monogamy clearly presents for many, what new ways might we find to understand commitment? What does this whole exploration really tell us about what we're fundamentally seeking in our connections with others?
That's a great thought to end on. Really provocative. If listeners want to explore this more, Esther Perel's The State of Affairs is definitely the place to go. It's a challenging, but I think really important read.
Agreed. Highly recommend it.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.